Hello again, and welcome back to Sheltered Sages. So this is a podcast where two former sheltered homeschoolers.
Yes,
You're nodding.
Yes, that's our tagline, I think.
Two former sheltered homeschoolers are talking through the complexities of life, generally through various subreddits and Reddit stories, and deciding basically who is the potential picklefoot, which we'll explain a little bit later, and also other interesting things that we feel like we want to talk about on this podcast.
Yes. Do you know what today is?
Today is a very special day, which has a specific name. Could you remind me of what that is?
So today is going to be the first of our, hopefully many, every fourth episode we're going to do what's called a Geek Dive. Yes. So Philip and I are both very much nerds in the traditional capacity, but also geeks. I never properly understand what the definition is. I think the nerd is the one that's more on like the sciencey side and like the mathematics, and the geek is the one that's more of like comic books and like video games and things like that, which is like the lines are so blurred these days that it doesn't really matter. But every fourth episode, this is something I pitched when we first started the podcast, we're going to do what's called a Geek Dive, where we kind of delve into some area of our geek fandom that we want to talk about. And we're going to probably talk a little bit more about ourselves in these podcast episodes. But of course, we're still going to hit the Reddit stories because that's probably what most of y'all are coming here for.
Absolutely. And because we are both, I'd say, geeks in this way, nerds and geeks, we wanted to share a little bit more about what we enjoy doing.
Yes.
So having a little bit of that there, hopefully you like it. If not, that's okay. Maybe you'll enjoy something that you didn't know you were going to enjoy, or maybe you'll realize, yeah, this is not for me. But now you get new stories that are kind of more specific towards its own thing. So you're like, okay, I'm learning something new. Also, I'm Philip. I didn't say that before.
And I'm Andrew. Hi. Hello there.
If this is your first episode, welcome to this podcast. If this is not your first episode, welcome back.
Thank you for coming again.
You probably should know who we are by now, but if you don't, we'll give our names every single time. That's fine.
Yeah, it's a good goal. So I think before we get started on the stories, let's talk about what this first Geek Dive is really going to be all about.
Okay, let's do it.
So we had a lot of potential topics that we could talk about for our first one, but the one that really was just like, this just is a good starting point, in my opinion, and I talked about it a little bit on our first one, is Dungeons and Dragons.
Ooh.
Yes.
That's in our intro, isn't it? No, our teaser.
Yes,
trailer.
It is. Whether it is a gateway to witchcraft.
Oh.
Yes. So we're not going to talk about that today. We might talk about that today. I don't know.
Should we not?
Talk about
okay,
it.
let's see.
I didn't do enough of a deep dive into that, but we can totally talk about the satanic panic movement of the 80s that caused the uprising of D&D causing witchcraft. But so we'll get to that.
Okay.
But so let's talk a little bit about D&D, Dungeons and Dragons.
Absolutely.
So I know I'm kind of taking the reins at the very beginning, but
no, you're good.
So you're newer to Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, I am. Yes. I had not played Dungeons and Dragons before meeting Andrew, and it was specifically because if you're in the homeschool world, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, Dungeons and Dragons was considered something that was of the occult, of something terrible, and it wasn't too good. I did not feel that way when I met Andrew. I kind of got past that point to understanding that it was a lot of people that had some misconceptions about the game. But then this new friend, Andrew, was like, you should totally play Dungeons and Dragons, see how it feels, and I enjoyed it. But what is Dungeons and Dragons?
Yes. So the way I like to describe Dungeons and Dragons is it is a collaborative storytelling game. So basically it is part of the category of games that are called tabletop role-playing games, or TTRPGs, and they're often played on a tabletop using dice, pencils, things like that. Some people get really fancy. They have little miniatures that they paint and full-on like 3D battle maps and stuff like that. I don't go that direction. I do battle maps, but they're all like digital, and we do little digital tokens and things like that.
Yep.
But it is basically this idea of everyone coming together and having a story being told. And there are two roles that you basically can have when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. There's one person called the Dungeon Master, who is the pretty much the arbiter who makes all of the judgment calls, who is helping to tell the story. They also voice all the non-player characters or NPCs, and basically just make sure that the game keeps moving forward. There are a lot of rules that are already designed to keep the game moving forward, but you basically need one person to act as kind of the end-all be-all when it comes to being a judge.
Yeah,
and
if you're thinking of like Monopoly, you have one person that's the banker that's making sure that the money goes to the right places.
Very similar to that.
In a very similar way, but way more complicated. Dungeon Master makes sure that we're following the rules and also the world is happening around us.
Yeah. So they're in charge of like setting the scene, actually like moving the story forward, those kind of things like that. So that's the one role. The other role is the player. And
Absolutely.
so the player, which is what you have the pleasure of being in a few of my campaigns right now, actually, is someone who creates a character that is exploring and interacting in this world. And some of them are very like Lord of the Rings fantasy themed. So you've got like your fighters, your elves, your archers, things like that. But then you also have like the more out there classes, like the bards, who are all about like mastering music, which you're playing in one of my campaigns.
Absolutely.
Fantastically, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I love it. There's also other characters like warlocks who actually make pact with entities and things like that, which is where I think a lot of the satanic panic comes from. But we'll get into that later.
Yep. There's a lot of stuff in there that once you really dive deep into it, the lore of the world and the lore that goes into Dungeons and Dragons does have some kind of, it's spells, it's magic, it's that kind of, what would you call it? The medieval fantasy?
Yeah, it's that like that high fantasy level of stuff.
Yeah.
And you get into like spells and there's a lot of like the undead and the occult and things like that you encounter. But the thing that's really, really cool about it, and this is what I pitch to anyone who tries to be like, oh, it's satanic, is it's like, you do not have to play the game in any prescribed world. A lot of people play their adventures in what's called the Sword Coast, which is one of the most popular realms of Dungeons and Dragons, and is like the official Wizards of the Coast setting that they do a lot of their stuff in. That being said, you can create your own world very, very, I don't want to say easily, but you can create your own world that things can be done in.
Yeah, and Andrew actually has created his own world that we're playing in. Absolutely incredible. We might talk about that a little bit more. Just he's a great dungeon master in that way. That world is fun to play in, and also the lore and the connection and the story that goes along with that world, if you're the dungeon master, can really be whatever you want, as long as you play within similar rules of what Dungeon Dragons
even
has.
and then you have the ability to like shape the world and things like that to your setting. So when I first started playing, there was no warlocks. No one was allowed to play a warlock because I didn't want anyone making pacts with devils or things like that, because I was like, that's a little bit too uncomfortable.
That's a good rule.
For me. But as I've grown more, I'm like, oh, it doesn't have to just be a pact with a devil. It could be literally just like, I'm making a pact with a powerful like fairy creature, or I'm making a pact with like a underwater sea monster or something like that has the ability to spread out their influence over the world.
Yep.
But it's not the real world, guys.
It's not. If you're okay with Marvel movies, at least most of them, you should be okay.
We're not
going to
talk about Doctor Strange.
We're not going to talk about Doctor Strange. We're not going to talk about the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah. That was a movie.
Forget that one. Everything else, if you're okay with that, you should be fine. There's Thor and Loki. They're Norse gods. So we're just,
So anyways, that all being said, we wanted our first deep dive to kind of be a little bit about it, because I did talk about me being like a professional dungeon master in our intro, or at least my intro in our first episode, because that is something I get to do. So I actually love it. I work with a company that basically you get to be a professional dungeon. I can actually plug them technically, but so I work with a company called Start Playing, and they actually like, you can go on that website and look for a specific game that you're wanting to play, not just Dungeons and Dragons, but like there's a lot of other systems that kind of meet whatever like goal you're trying to reach when it comes to playing a game. And you can find a dungeon master who like charges different prices for playing and things like that. And so I actually run several games through that right now, which is so much fun. I love getting to do that. But it's there's something that everyone can find. That's my biggest thing about it, is like, whether you're a person who's a number cruncher and wants to like fight things and do huge amounts of damage, you can hit that niche. If you're a person who loves theater and acting and role playing, there is like full settings for that. If you're a person who just loves like that thrill of finding new things and discovering a world and exploring.
That's me.
There is something for everyone. And so it's like, I'm a huge proponent of Dungeons and Dragons. I love encouraging people. The after school program that I work at, I actually introduced a lot of the kids to Dungeons and Dragons, and they love it. They're really mad at me because we only play once a month and they want me to play more frequently, but it's really hard to get 9 kids together at the same time to play Dungeons and Dragons.
But that's also fair. So if you don't know as much about Dungeons and Dragons but have been curious, please listen to a podcast. If you are not of a certain age or you don't like more serious stuff, try to find a podcast that has Dungeons and Dragons content that is not too serious or mature.
There's a lot of variety. Like if you're more of the mature variety, Critical Role is one of the more well-known ones. And they're actually, I think, finishing up their last season, if they haven't already, or their last campaign. So there's like 3 campaigns worth of content that you can listen to. There's also like the TV show and stuff like that. Again, for more mature audiences. Yeah. But there are a lot of different podcasts too that are safe and fun for the whole family. There's what was the one that I used to love? It's literally a group of Hollywood actors that get transported from Hollywood and sent into a Dungeons and Dragons world. And like one of them's an actress, the other one's like a stunt coordinator, and the last one's like a lighting tech. And like the 3 of them are sent to this other world and they got to try and find a way to get back. And it was so much fun. There's so many different people that do a variety of different stories, but you'll find one that fits your niche if you're ever curious about it. And a lot of them go into how to actually play the game.
That's fair. But we are going to talk today, not necessarily on the Dungeons and Dragons, even though it'll be a part of this story as well. We're going to talk about some of the complications that can happen when you're playing a role-playing game with friends, family members, and other individuals around you. Absolutely. The good and the bad.
And the ugly.
So, would you like me to start with a story, sir?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's get started. Let's start with the first one. A little preface for everything. We usually read from the subreddit called Am I the A-hole? But we like to go and switch it over to Picklefoot just because it's a little bit nicer to say instead of having to say those words over and over and over again. So if you hear Picklefoot, you can substitute in your mind for the other word, or you can just go, hey, it's Picklefoot. That's nice.
It's a great homeschool insult.
Absolutely. So, first story we have for today. Am I the Picklefoot for not ending a Dungeons and Dragons in-game relationship between mine and a female player's character, even though my girlfriend wants me to?
Oh, no.
I should have warned you. This is a little more heavy.
Oh, yeah. All right, we're starting out with the banger. All right, let's go. Let's do it.
Let's hit it. First off, don't judge my language too hard. I'm not a native speaker, so just have that preface.
Understood.
I, a 30-year-old male, have been playing pen and paper for a long time, and half a year ago, I finally started playing D&D.
I think pen and paper might actually be a different role-playing game.
Oh,
I might be wrong. I'd have to do some research, but that might be a different
potentially
system.
Something else. Oh, well, I didn't know that. That's crazy. Yeah. I joined an ongoing homebrew campaign of a friend, and during the sessions, my character and the character of another player, a 28-year-old female, get along really well, and their background stories are similar, and their chosen personalities fit together. Since some time now, they stick together, look after each other, which lead to the other players calling them the freak couple. Reborn and Drow both aren't common in the world we're playing. After a session some time ago, the player asked me if it would be okay for me if our characters tried getting closer and becoming a couple. And I said, sure, let's try it. So the woman asked him if they wanted to be a couple, their characters in the game. Last session, they got together and it worked well so far. Our dungeon master even has plans now and wants to make it a bigger part of the story. When I told my girlfriend about it, she was kind of annoyed and jokingly said things like, wow, seems like a real girlfriend isn't enough, and so on. But after talking to her, she admitted that she doesn't like the idea. I've told her that there's nothing going on between me and the player, it's only the characters, but she still doesn't like it. I don't want to end my character's relationship now because it really is part of the campaign, but I'm wondering if maybe I should just do it for my girlfriend. Am I the Picklefoot?
This is a very complex issue.
Isn't it?
I love it. Okay. I don't know if I missed it. Did he explain how long he's been in his relationship with his girlfriend?
Let me check. He has not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me preface this by stating that in-game relationships in D&D can be a really cool part of the game.
Yep.
They are something that can really help characters delve into the stories of the characters and the background and all these other aspects of the story. Especially if you've watched some actual plays, or if you've played yourself and you've done the relationship thing, it can be a lot of fun. I think how the female player handled it was exactly what you need to do. It's exactly the kind of thing. It's like, hey, our characters have a really good chemistry in game. Yeah. Let's see if would you be okay with us pursuing a relationship of the characters in the game? So it's very important for those who are not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons. Yep. As I talked about the players, they're not you. They are supposed to be just like if you're playing a video game, they are a character that you have created that exists in the world. Now, a lot of people, when they first start playing, they make the mistake of creating a character that's too much like them, and so there can be what's called character bleed, where you kind of feel like things that happen to the character in game are happening to you.
Yep.
Or vice versa, where something like you bring in an emotion towards another player that you're say you're frustrated with your friend out of game, and then in game suddenly you're picking fights with them or things like that. So it's called character bleed. But if players are good, which it sounds like this person has experience with something or role-playing experience, it's very easy for it to be creating these this separate dynamic. It's the same concept, in my opinion, of two actors having a romance on stage. It is, if from a professional, from a very top-down perspective, there is no actual relationship between the two people, the actors. It is just their people on stage. That being said, and this is what's really, really important. Yep. Not everyone is comfortable, if they're in a relationship with that person, with that dynamic existing.
Yes.
And so it is incredibly important whenever, and this is another cool deep dive of myself. I am a actor. I do stage productions, I do musicals, things like that. Yep. And it's actually been a very ongoing conversation that me and my wife had about if I ever got a role where I needed to kiss someone on stage. And it's something that we've discussed. Initially, she's not entirely comfortable with it, but it's one of those things that she says, we can certainly talk about it if that ever comes up, because I don't want to stifle your ability to act and things like that. Yeah. So it's definitely something that we can talk about and what the realistics are. And it's something, in general that we discuss. That being said, if your partner is important to you.
Yep. Which they should be. And that's why I asked about the length of the relationship, because if this is someone that's it's a 1 month relationship and this person is being hey, I don't feel comfortable with that, then you have the right to look at it and just be okay, well, how important is this relationship for me versus this campaign? Yeah. Now, I know a lot of people, you're being oh, well, it's just a game, so just get over it. Campaigns are a lot. Yes.
Campaigns. Yes. Our campaign has been spreading. We're over around the 2-year mark, I think, of us playing. And so they're year-long commitments sometimes, or some of these can run for long periods of time. And so when things happen big in the game, which it sounds like this relationship is, it is very important and very challenging to retcon or change this dynamic in the game. Yeah. It can be very challenging.
Absolutely.
What I would have done in that situation would have been, as soon as that person playing the female character asked me, can we have a relationship? I would have been let me check with my girlfriend or my wife or my fiance or whoever it is, or my partner, and be are you comfortable with that dynamic happening? But unfortunately, you already made the decision and now are sharing it with your partner, who clearly is not comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing too, communication across there, what you're saying about actors as well. There are movies, there are TV shows where potentially some actors are going to have to be in relationships. Sometimes that works out really, really well, where those actors can separate between their personal lives and their professional lives and do that. Other times it doesn't happen so well, where you'll have those situations where, those actors will eventually end up in relationships with their on-screen partners. it gets tricky in that way. And I think being open with yourself and with your partner on what that is important. Beyond all that, this is a game that you're playing. This is something that you've decided to do. And I still feel that if your partner is uncomfortable with it, it should still be a conversation of, hey, this is very important to me. This is really what I want to do with it. And this is where I want to go with this character. Can we kind of agree on that level to continue on with that?
And that's really the conversation that's going to have to come down to. It's like, okay, so we're not comfortable with the fact that they're in a relationship. All right, it's happened now.
Yeah.
So we need to move forward with this. Yep. So we obviously addressing it as like retconning the whole thing, not making it happen. That's not going to happen because it is now a huge part of the game.
Yeah.
So we need to move forward. There's something that we do in Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm a very big proponent of anytime you're doing a tabletop role-playing game or you're doing these things where it's collaborative storytelling, where we talk about boundaries and what we're comfortable with happening and not comfortable with happening. And I try to do that at the very beginning of any game that I run because I want to make sure everyone's on the same page before these things happen. So a lot of times, and when it comes to romance and things like that, we talk a lot about like, what does that romance look like? And so that I think is what they're going to need to do. So what I think needs to happen is I think she and the player need to sit down. So the guy who's the person who's writing this story, he and his partner need to sit down, have a conversation about what this is. She might not fully understand what D&D is and that it is you playing a character. If she does, and once you've explained that, and she understands that, and if she still feels this way, then it needs to come to a communication of like, okay, well, let's sit down with the other person who's involved in this other player, if that's a possibility, and let's describe what, as your partner, you are comfortable with happening, you're not comfortable with happening, and like what can and can't be alluded to. So like maybe they're in a relationship, but I don't want to hear any descriptions of you guys kissing. Or like it can be a hugging, but I don't want to hear about these things happening or it getting to like the really more explicit things that relationships happen. I have a very strict no explicit things happening in any of my games. I keep a PG-13 rating.
That's great.
Because I don't want anyone at my table to feel uncomfortable. So that's where it comes down to is it's communication. I know we say this all the time. So we should have like a little check counter every time we say communication like is going to solve the problem. But it really is the solution to this situation is like just needs to be open communication. If all of that has happened and still nothing, like she is still against it, then it's time for you to evaluate the relationship. If this is so important, and I'm not going to be one of those people that's like, it's just a game, get over for it. Like, no, if D&D is important for you, because that's what it comes down to, is it's like that freedom to be able to explore these in-character relationships is important to you, then you need to find a partner who's going to be comfortable with that.
That's fair. It does get messier, though.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay.
We have edits.
There's edits?
There's edits.
All right. Let's see.
I'm not going to put them in order just for thematic value.
Oh, I love thematic value.
So this is edit number 2. Not edit number 1. It said, to clarify, the in-game romance is on a surface level. We're talking about you guys are back in the city. What do you want to do? And they said, we'll spend some time in the park together. Cool. Next guy, what about you? Kind of moving over. Edit number 3, they just said, my bad. In my head, I'm still 29 sometimes. I don't know what that was about. And then edit number 1.
Okay.
You ready for this one?
Let's go.
Just remembered. This is the original poster. They just remembered this. Maybe the problem is that I once had a relationship with a girl I met through pen and paper, but that was years ago before I even met my girlfriend, and it went horribly. So maybe she's worried about that. When I asked her, she said no, but that's not it. But I don't know.
Making grumbling noises.
Okay. And the last one.
Oh, there's more.
Conclusion is, I guess the best idea really would be telling the group that my girlfriend isn't comfortable with the idea and that we should cancel it. Kind of annoying that, but I guess it's better this way. So with that edit, does that change your opinion on the situation?
Certainly does. Absolutely does. So now we're delving into insecurity.
Exactly.
And you've already shown before issues with character bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, okay, did they say that the person that they had a relationship with prior was because they started a relationship in game, or did I miss that? I know he said he did it with or he was in a relationship with someone from...
It doesn't say whether they started because of it, but yes, he met them through
the game. See, that's where it becomes an issue, because now you've already shown that you struggle with that separation of character and person.
Mm-hmm.
And now if your partner knows about this, which it sounds like she does,
Yep.
yes, then she has every right to have that insecurity because you have done it in the past.
Yep.
So I'll stand by what I said before. Boundaries need to be created. She has every right to feel a little uncomfortable knowing that you have in the past made that mistake of character bleed. Now, I'm not saying that relationships cannot be formed from tabletop role-playing groups and things like that, but you've already acknowledged it went really bad.
Yep.
So it's certainly possible that this is not a good idea. And that's where I think it really needs to come down to, is it's just like, this is going to be something where you guys have to talk about it. And yes, it's really hard with insecurities.
Yeah.
Because you're not responsible for someone being insecure about it.
Nope.
But if you care about that person, you should address those insecurities and
Absolutely.
recognize whether or not it's one of those things that you need to set up safeguards for, or if it is something that maybe it's a couples therapy thing. Maybe you guys need to go see a therapist. She needs to have the confidence to know that nothing is going to come of this in-game relationship that you two have. But at the same time, you need to recognize that she has every right to have these initial feelings of discomfort.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's why you need to move in that direction of just saying, hey, this isn't the best idea right now.
Yep.
Maybe in a couple of years after my partner and I are really comfortable and confident in the relationship, maybe I can pursue something like this.
Yep.
But right now, that's a no-go.
Yeah.
And I think that, so with that additional context, I would say he would be the picklefoot if he continued to do that.
Yep. And the comment that's down there, it says, a gentle, you're the picklefoot. I feel like you're ignoring your girlfriend's concerns and potentially entering into an avenue for emotional and virtual cheating. I guess you need to ask yourself if this virtual girlfriend is worth risking a relationship with your real girlfriend. If it is, maybe you need to reconsider your relationship and your feelings for the female player.
That's a very big point.
And so I think overall, it's with everything that you're playing, especially with Dungeons and Dragons, it's a story that's being told by everyone at that table. And so while it is something separate from your personal life, your personal life should be the most important in those kinds of ways. And if you feel like it is getting in the way of what your actual life is doing and you don't want it to do that, you need to take steps to make sure that you're okay in that way. Also, cheating is cheating regardless of where it happens in. If you can't handle that separation, like you're saying, that character bleed, probably not a good idea to go into any sorts of things like that.
Absolutely.
Even for the characters that I'm playing, I even play with my wife. My wife plays with me in most of the games that I'm in. And there is a character that I'm playing right now that has a relationship, but it is with my wife. I know she would feel comfortable if I had a relationship with another character in there, but because we discussed it with each other, we are okay with that. We haven't done that yet, but it's because we had that communication. But beyond that, it's also like, it's fun to have like a little pretend relationship with her in the game too.
Absolutely.
And it's the kind of thing. You don't have to force something like that, especially if someone's uncomfortable. If it's good for the story and if it's good for your partner, you should be able to do it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. As like, that is the best possible outcome, in my opinion, is two characters who are in a relationship in the real world end up having a very different and unique relationship in game. So like in the actual play world, I don't want to be like a Critical Role stan, but I'm gonna pitch it because two of the players in Critical Role during campaign 2, Laura Bailey and
I'm gonna look
Travis Willingham.
Okay,
that's his name. Yeah, so Laura Bailey and Travis Willingham are married in like the real world. In campaign 2, they play two characters that do eventually end up in a romantic relationship, and I love it because it's the most sweetest, wholesome thing ever. One of them plays like a goofy little trickster character, and the other one plays this like more stoic paladin character, and they end up coming together in an adorable romance that is very clearly not what their real life is like, but it was just so beautiful. And so I loved it because like watching that develop, it just felt so sweet and so wholesome. And so that is absolutely an option. So what he needs to do is he needs to get his girlfriend into playing D&D and then start a relationship with her. Problem solved.
There you go. And
all
then he'll
issues
fall in love with
gone.
his girlfriend in the virtual world and in the real world, and it's perfect. That's what
great.
you need. But I'll say for this one, you're kind of the pickle foot.
I like the gentle pickle foot. I think that's fair.
Gentle pickle foot.
Yeah.
Just kind of you focus on your girlfriend a little bit more, see what she's feeling there, and like work through it.
Absolutely.
So we opened on that one.
Yeah,
that was fun, right?
That was fun.
Yeah.
I think it helps us delve a little bit more into what kind of things happen with D&D.
Ooh, okay.
So I have another story relatively adjacent to that. This one is from r/D&D horror stories. So this is a whole other subreddit that if you want to read a lot of D&D horror stories, this is the place to go. And some of them get really spicy.
Exactly.
So just be careful. This is not one of those.
Okay.
This one is called, As They Say, Be Careful What You Wish For.
Is it about a genie?
No, but it is about wishes.
Okay.
So, let's begin. A player invited one of his friends to join us in our Tuesday game, and this player took advantage of our DM's very generous 1 free item per player gift. New guy chooses a ring of 3 wishes. Are you familiar with the wish spell?
I am not familiar with the wish spell.
Before we continue, I feel like it is only fair that I read the wish spell to you.
Please do.
So that you understand what this is. So, the Ring of 3 Wishes is basically a ring that gives you 3 casts of this spell that you can use. So, the wish spell is described as following. So this is from the official Dungeons & Dragons spellbook.
Okay.
Wish is the mightiest spell a mortal can cast. By simply speaking aloud, you can alter reality itself. The basic use of this spell is to duplicate any other spell of level 8 or lower. Not going to get into that, but highest level spell you can cast is level 9. So if you use it this way, you don't need to meet any requirements to cast that spell, including any costly components. The spell simply takes effect. Alternatively, you can create additional following effects of your choice. Now, there's a list of different things that are prescribed that you can do with this spell.
Yeah.
However, the one that I'm going to read is one at the very end called Reshape Reality. So this is what a lot of people use Wish for.
Yeah.
And it's for this idea of, I have a very specific thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
So the spell reads, you may wish for something not included in any of the other effects. To do so, state your wish to the DM as precisely as possible. The DM, or the Dungeon Master, has great latitude in ruling what occurs in such an instance. The greater the wish, the greater the likelihood that something goes wrong. This spell might simply fail. The effect you desire might be achieved only in part, or you might suffer an unforeseen consequence as a result of how you worded the wish. Very powerful spell. And so this person, this DM, has a very loose free gift rule, which I would not do. I would be like, you can have a free item up to this rarity. There's rare, uncommon, rare, legendary, artifact level. I would say probably a free uncommon item.
Yeah.
Maybe rare if I was being super generous and it was something that wasn't going to impact the game, but that's at my discretion. So, needless to say, that's what the person wished for. The DM allowed it, but stated the ring appeared to have 2 of the wishes already consumed.
So 1 wish.
Only 1 wish. New guy argued a bit before saying with a wide grin, okay, I wish for permanent access to the wish spell. It doesn't require a spell slot when used, nor will it apply any of its negative effects on me. The DM just sighed and responded, all right, fair, but you can only use the spell once a day within reason. Reminder, you're still a low-level player, and it is a max-level spell. Free spell slot or not, blame the gods. So, the gods of the world.
Yeah.
Cue new guy attempting wishes like, number 1, no women can resist my charms.
Oh, no.
I know. I already don't like this person just from that first attempt.
Oh, no.
Number 2, I have a pocket dimension in my bag where I have millions of platinum. Platinum is the highest currency in the game, and it's worth like 10 gold each. That's asking for basically infinite money.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, I am now max level and considered a god among men. DM responds with a sort of monkey's paw approach, which I love. This is why I chose this story.
Yeah.
Number 1, which was the no women can resist my charm. Mm-hmm. As you walk through town, you are accosted by 12 elderly women. Before you know it, all your trinkets are missing.
Yep.
In place of them, you find a note that reads, "Thank you, dearie. Sincerely, the Coalition of Hags."
Wow. I love that.
Number 2, the pocket dimension filled with millions of platinum.
Yeah, how will we fix that?
Okay, the dimension exists in your bag. He never mentioned he could remove the platinum. So he just has this extra dimensional space with millions of platinum he can never touch.
I love that.
Number 3, you find a temple, which was the I'm now max level and considered a god among men. Mm-hmm. You find a temple that has seemingly been built overnight. Your face adorns the walls and windows, and as you're approached, robed men bow to you, chanting, "All hail max level." Because he said, "I am now max level."
That's beautiful.
Apparently there are more examples, but those were the OP's favorites. Mm-hmm. Eventually, push comes to shove, and he tries to wish the BBEG dead. Are you familiar what a BBEG is?
I am not.
Okay, so BBEG is kind of just an acronym that the Dungeons & Dragons community uses, and it basically means big, bad, evil guy.
Wow.
So basically...
So descriptive.
Yeah, so descriptive.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it will be like the BBEG.
Yep.
Right? So you guys have no idea who the BBG is in either campaigns yet, which I love.
Okay.
So he wished for that specifically. I wish the BBEG dead.
Yeah.
The DM tells him that wish won't work because we have no idea who the BBEG actually is.
Sure.
So that doesn't make any sense. That'd be like wishing, I wish Gerald dead. Who's Gerald?
Yeah. Gerald, we don't wish that you're dead.
Wish Gerald dead.
Please stay alive.
Yes. Finally, the player just says, "Screw it. I wish for the source of my problems to be erased from existence." This time, the DM smiles. Everyone make a perception check, except you, the new guy. As everyone does, they all succeed. You all suddenly wonder why you're standing in this particular area. In front of you, laying in the street, you find a ring. You'll notice that it's a ring of 3 wishes, but unfortunately, all have been consumed. And I think that's a great place for us to leave off till next week. So, do you realize what just happened there?
Yep. He got rid of himself.
Yep.
Which is so fitting.
I love it so much.
It's a beautiful thing. Okay, for those who haven't played Dungeons and Dragons before, one of the reasons it's so very fun is because while players get to make choices like we were talking about in this story, the dungeon master is kind of responding to those choices real time. Mm-hmm. So like if I go over with my character and say I'm making a certain wish, our dungeon master, Andrew in this case, might not know or probably won't know what that wish is, but with their really good writing prowess and like storytelling skills are able to write it in. So this kind of really quick kind of thinking through the problems that this character is creating for the rest of it is more than just impressive. It's like, wow, you are really good at storytelling right? Above making sure that everyone else is having fun.
Brilliant. I didn't put it in this one, but there's a comment that was like God tier DM level right here.
Yeah.
The amount of like genuinely the amount of creativity you have to be able to come up with that on the spot is insane to me.
It's incredible.
It's wild.
And beyond that too, I know a lot of people have weird feelings about what they should be able to do and what they shouldn't be able to do in Dungeons and Dragons. And this is kind of more of a storytelling thing versus an actual Dungeons and Dragons thing. But let's say you have a character who is super, super, super powerful, like more powerful than Superman, and is able to do. What do you say?
It's called a Mary Sue.
Oh, Mary Sue.
Or a, what's the other one? Or a Mark Sue or something like that.
Yeah, it's like, okay, what problems can this character come up against in the storyline that you're trying to tell? If they can break through any kind of barrier, if they can fly faster than sound and goes back in time. It's like there's not much that could happen to this character to be interesting. Any bad thing that could ever be thrown against them could be resolved. And there are some times where you can play around with that storyline and have really complicated ethical issues along with it. I think they did a really good job in Invincible, where they were talking about how powerful Omni-Man was and things like that. And
also a very mature show if you're not
you probably shouldn't watch that if you're not of age. But it's an interesting way of playing around with those super powerful characters. When you are playing with other individuals, especially in a Dungeons and Dragons kind of scope, if you have a super powerful character with super powerful skills, it's not fun for everyone else.
No.
Like if you walk up and you're just like, I just go over and kill the big bad guy. All right, well, it's over. This campaign that could have taken years of like really interesting storytelling and big reveals and mysteries is now completely ruined.
Exactly.
And so with this kind of gaming, it's less of how can we kill the bad guy. It's not like a video game where you're like, let me just get through it as soon as possible. It's experiencing that world. It's having fun with other players. It's finding those backstories. It's creating new backstories along with it, and kind of having friends with other people around you and the people that are in this world. It's a really nice kind of fun thing. So then there's people who want to take advantage of that and kind of ruin it. I will say, just a little thing. There was one campaign that I was in, and I wasn't the only one who did it. You weren't the dungeon master for that one. They allowed us to take whatever items we wanted into our characters. It was a one shot, which is like a very shorter version of it. That was such a fun
one shot.
I had a potion, a gold dragon potion, which means like at any point if I took that potion, my character, I could turn into a very powerful gold dragon. I did not use it once.
Nope.
Because it was a completely different setting. It was absolutely
It's really hard to be a gold dragon when you're underwater.
Exactly.
That's basically what it was.
But I was not the only one who had the gold dragon potion. Another player also had the gold dragon potion.
Also didn't use it.
Yeah, and also didn't use it. But it was fun because afterwards, when we were talking about it, we were like, at the same time, we're thinking, maybe I can use the gold dragon potion. But we realized gold dragons can't breathe underwater, so it'd still be useless.
Yeah. That was a fun. Yeah, no. Well, so the point that I want to make is this person comes from a very interesting mindset that there are a few people who play D&D come from. And so it's this mindset of I have to beat D&D.
Yes.
D&D is not something that you beat.
Nope.
D&D, as I said at the very beginning, is this idea of collaboration. We are working together as a team to create a story, and a story requires conflict. It requires people to have moments of great triumph, but also moments of failure. That's why we play with dice. We play with dice because it's supposed to generate this idea of how the world works.
Yeah.
How sometimes you might be really skilled in something like being quiet and stealthy, but because of the random chance of things happening, yes, you might be the quietest person in the world, but you can't stop a loose stone in the ground that you didn't see from cracking and alerting the nearby guards.
Absolutely.
That sometimes happens, and that's why we roll dice. So this person's mindset is what is really at fault here. It's this idea of I'm going to outsmart this dungeon master. I'm going to beat this game. Yep. And I've run into players like this in my professional side of things. I've had people who some people call them power gamers. Other people call them just bad D players, other things like that. Yeah. There is a setting where you can play a character with the intention of them being incredibly powerful. And the DM is designing a world where that is for them, where that is the goal. Yep. If you're just playing a regular D&D game, the concept of the goal is generating a character that is going to grow over the course of the time. If they start out too powerful, as you said, it ruins the fun for everyone else because they don't have the opportunity to grow their character either. Yeah. So I love how this DM handled it.
It was great.
It was so brilliant.
Fantastic job there.
I think there was one comment I wanted to read. Yeah. Because the original poster actually responded. So the person commented, amazing story. Yeah. Monkey's Paw D&D edition. But quick question, was the ring the source of his problems or was that himself? And they did clarify that the character himself was erased from existence.
That's fair.
As all the players' issues came from the unlimited wishes, he wished for using the ring's initial wish. Basically, after consuming the ring's only wish, it became ordinary.
That's
so
fair.
I just love it.
I would have my character pick up the ring and then just keep it with me at all times without understanding what it is.
One of your characters is so clueless about magic, and I love it so much.
We'll have to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah, so that's a good... I love creative problems to things like that.
Yeah.
I will say I'm not a big fan of the dealing with outside problems at the table. Mm-hmm. So this is clearly one of those people that's like, you're just going to be problematic.
Yep.
And so the DM could have been like, hey, that's not how we're going to play. Let's try to do something else.
Yeah.
But they did choose to deal with it creatively in world. And like, honestly, if it's not someone that you're friends with and you're not worried about keeping around and that's how you want to deal with it and you can be creative, absolutely. Especially if it's written into the rules of the world. Like, you do a vague wish, I can give a vague answer.
Yeah.
And I love it.
And if everyone is okay with it as well, if everyone's like vibing with it, because it sounds like a really cool idea and a concept, and that player, even as difficult as they were, they continued playing after he kept taking those wishes and twisting them, which is in the rule book of what they can do with it. I think it's cool. Yeah.
I definitely think that player is probably either not playing with them anymore or had a huge reality check.
Oh, of course. That player is kind of a picklefoot, but I think in a way, like, it's the opposite in this one. Instead of finding a picklefoot, we found a really good DM.
Yes, and I love it. I love a good Dungeon Master story. All right, you got another one for me?
I have another one for you in a very similar vein.
Oh.
The one that you just read.
Love it. Let's do it.
All right, so it says Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, this is from a different subreddit. It's called RPG Horror Stories. So
love it.
Fantastic one, similar to the one that you read me there. But it says Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master runs a campaign that's basically a book with his Dungeon Master playable character as the protagonist.
Oh, the dreaded DMpc.
There it goes.
Oh, all right. Let's delve into this one.
Here we go.
So many feelings about this.
Many exhilarating stories to tell of this atrocious campaign. But I'll begin with the episode that stuck with me the most. When I was in high school, I joined a D&D group, a Dungeons & Dragons group, of other high school kids. And this kid among was the current Dungeon Master. Before this campaign, they played another, their first one, that was run by a more experienced, older player. The first thing I noticed in the campaign was that the Dungeon Master had an unhealthy obsession with the non-playable characters, which are in the world of Dungeons and Dragons.
NPCs.
You can play them. To the point where he would have conversations with himself for like 10 minutes straight, specifically with one non-playable character, a certain paladin, who I then discovered was the Dungeon Master's character in the previous campaign they played in. The campaign in its whole was horrible. They say a very specific group of words there.
That's fair.
So I didn't really care about the story, which was just as terrible as everything else, or whatever, and just kept playing for the combat, which was kind of fun with my Blaster Caster Wizard.
Nice.
The issues began when he realized that the players probably didn't care just how cool his megalomaniac, Mary Sue, mega overpowered paladin original character was. That's a lot
of adjectives.
Yes. So he decided to have him as a Dungeon Master playable character for a while. Those were probably the worst Dungeons and Dragons sessions I've ever played in. To give a little context before I continue on there, the Dungeon Master is generally supposed to play as the non-playable characters in the world, the characters that kind of fill out the scope, the world itself, and kind of give storylines to the rest of things that are happening. Dungeon Master generally doesn't play a character, not because we don't want them to have fun. We of course want the Dungeon Master to have fun, but it's also they're balancing so much in the world, so to also have them play a character and have that kind of acting in their minds as well as playing like roles and having abilities and stuff gets kind of complicated. There are certain characters that Dungeon Masters will bring in as like a non-playable character to assist sometimes, but generally not for the extended period, or if it is, they are more of assistant character and not a full-on like main character in the storyline.
Yeah, they should always be someone that uplifts the party and never steals the spotlight.
Which Andrew does wonderfully. I love it. To the point that sometimes I bring the non-playable characters into the storylines, and he's like, "Oh my gosh,
Now
really,
I
Phil?"
remember who it is. Or like I'll create someone on the fly, and then you'll just be like, "Yeah, let's learn all about this person's backstory," and I'm just like. So now I have to create things on the fly because they've discovered if I don't have a previous backstory for them, they're quote unquote not important.
Exactly.
But like, so now I just have to generate in the back of my mind full backstories for any possible.
Which is wonderful. He's a great writer. So getting him to write it on the fly is really fun. Back to our story though. So on this one worst D&D session they've ever had, in one of them, we went to the Underdark, which is a location in the Dungeons & Dragons world, to fight some white dragon. And we were all somewhat hyped for the combat, which I could tell that the other players also thought was the only acceptable part of the campaign. The, says it expletive, Dungeon Master... playable character Paladin followed us, however. And then it was revealed that the dragon was important to the Paladin's backstory and killed his brother or whatever. Without even looking up from my character sheet, I could tell that all the other players were already rolling their eyes like cartoon characters. We got to the dragon, rolled initiative, and not even half of the players had the chance to act in the first round that the Paladin pulled out one of his super overpowered moves and one-shot at the dragon, basically killed them in one hit. I bet the Dungeon Master felt like it was the coolest thing ever while describing that, but the reactions he received were justifiably looks of boredom and disappointment. The rest of the campaign was a mess, and I truly believe now that what it needed was a murderous player that would have tried to kill the Paladin dude. Either we got rid of the guy, or more likely, it would have ended in a full, like, player killing of the entire players in there, and the campaign would have ended.
Or
either
TPK
way,
is what we like to call it.
TPK, yes.
Total
either
players
way,
killed.
Win. Fun story,
is
right?
that the end?
That's
Am I able to comment on this?
Please. Please comment.
All right.
As a dungeon master, as a person who plays D&D.
Yes. Okay. So first thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to hold a little bit of my punches because this person is a high schooler.
Yes.
This is a high school club. You're learning how to storytell. A lot of kids get drawn to D&D, I think, because they watch a lot of like TV shows, or they don't have a full understanding of like what D&D is. So this person has played D&D in the past. It sounds like they had a previous campaign. Could have been the entire school year, could have been a semester, not really sure what the details are. But this is a very common symptom of, as the title kind of says, is someone wanting to write a story and trying to use D&D to do that.
Yes.
Okay, so when I first started playing D&D, I was actually older than this kid because I graduated high school.
Yeah.
And when I first started playing, thank you. I roll my eyes, but I recognize some people do struggle with that, so I will take back that comment. But when I first started playing, when I first introduced it to me and my two brothers, it was just the three of us, and I didn't understand how D&D worked. I wanted to play a character, so I created my own DMpc that played along with them and did all the things. And it is so easy to get wrapped up in being the main character because you're just like, well, I have all of the final say of everything. So it's so easy, even if I'm rolling my attacks, to be like, oh, well, that's conveniently enough to hit him. And, oh, well, that damage that's enough to do it. Because I know how much health the final boss has. And they don't know. So I could kill it all very easily. And so I really quickly realized that it's like, that's not how we properly play. I think what the problem is this person wanted to keep playing their character, but found out that no one wanted to play, or no one wanted to be the dungeon master, which is a very normal problem when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, sorry.
No. I'm okay. I prefer to dungeon master even more now that I have one campaign where I get to be the player, and I love it because it does give me that opportunity to have that outlet of being a player. But I do very much prefer being the dungeon master because I have learned the joys of being able to help other people find their stories and getting to be the person that creates the challenge for them. But that is a hard point to get to, especially when you're young and you're learning how this game works. You just want to be able to tell a really cool story about a really powerful character defeating the dragon. And I'm like, that's great. But what you missed out on the opportunity is you had all of these players who were hyped for this. And it would have created this really cool story of you guys fighting a dragon if you would just let them do it.
There's other people in the game that want to play as well. It's a group kind of game. You can't play Dungeons and Dragons really by yourself. Or I guess you could.
You can. There's actually ways to do it by yourself. Yeah, there's whole systems that are set up that actually, like, it's called an oracle system, where it's like you play by yourself and then you roll the dice and it answers questions for you.
Oh, nice.
And like you still have to be creative and you still do it. So if I ever like need a real bad fix, I actually play by myself and I'll like create character. I usually play as like 2 characters so I can have some variety. I play as like a cleric and like a barbarian or like a wizard and a rogue.
Cool.
It's fun to have that variety. But like you can play by yourself. But that being said, D&D in a group setting is supposed to be this idea of like that collaboration.
Exactly. The story is being created with everyone together. And even though only one character or one person is really building the bulk of that story out, the rest of them are adding to it and adding little curveballs. That's why it's fun, because even the dungeon master doesn't necessarily know what's going to happen next.
And so that's one of those things too that like we can talk a little bit about D&D and in terms of there's these concepts called railroading, which is always brought up when you talk about Dungeons and Dragons and more of the inexperienced dungeon masters. So railroading is this concept where you're sticking these players on a railroad track and you're sending them in the direction that you want them to go. There are some campaigns that are designed to be more of like you go to point A, then point B, then point C. And that's similar in concept, but it's more of like a narrow focus. Then there are campaigns that are more sandboxy, where it's like you have the freedom as your characters to tell me where you're going next, which is what I have for one of my campaigns. And then another campaign I have it that's a little bit more streamlined of like, these are the things that you're going to do and going to be able to do.
A really quick example of the railroady type system is like if you go into a room and suddenly there's only one door in this room. And you're like, is there any trapdoors? Nope, there's only one door in this room. Is there any other ways to go? Actually, the door is glowing right now. You probably want to go over to that door. The door has opened itself and you feel something drawing you in.
You feel pushed by an invisible wall. I love my... Sorry about this, Jonathan. My little brother, when he DM'd once, he was DMing Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is a fun campaign, but like he needed the players to go into the shop to meet this NPC because he was letting them do an introduction. And instead of them starting the campaign in this shop, all of these players were being really like, I love them, I know each and every one of them are friends of mine, but they were being really toxic and being like, I'm not gonna go in there, like clearly I know we're supposed to go in there, but I'm not gonna go in there. And so he literally had an invisible wall that pushed them into this building. I wasn't there for that.
You need to do this for the rest of the story.
It's like, and it's hard because sometimes, especially with like pre-written campaigns, you kind of have to be a little bit more direct unless this is where you're going, because that's what I have content for. But at other times, but it comes down to making that clear at the beginning. All that to be said, what this kid had the issues with was this idea of it was about him.
Yes.
He was talking to NPCs for 10 plus minutes, talking to himself. It's like, no, dude, or girl, I don't know who they were. But you are creating a story and leaving everyone else out.
Yeah.
You need to have, and I've had
It's a he.
It's a he.
Yeah.
Okay. So like you and I know, like I've like one of the campaigns I'm going to talk about Bora for a little bit.
Okay.
But like, so there was a moment where literally we spent 15 days in the game in the desert, 3 or 4 sessions, I think, where you're traveling through desert. I had this really cool NPC that I had designed. I had a backstory with. I tied it into your character's backstory, actually. Because I wanted it to be this fun moment of like, as you travel through the desert, you get to know this guide and this companion and things like that. You get to the opportunity to just learn more about each other. And no one asked him anything.
Not one person asked him a single question about himself.
About him.
I will say my character did ask him a bunch of questions about the desert.
Yes.
In an annoying way.
In very annoying ways. I loved it. It was so much fun. But like, it wasn't until we had a fight with a bandit king in the desert, and he like, the character pulled out these dual daggers and started fighting with like this like very rogue-like fighting style, that everyone was like, wait a second, who is this guy? And it literally wasn't until the night before you guys entered the city at a campfire that people finally started asking the questions. And it's like, so there's so many, like, sometimes there's inverses of that where it's like, I have this fun character I want to share, but it literally requires you guys to ask questions. And that's as part of D&D. That's what happens sometimes. There are characters that I introduced in areas that you guys have been that you have never seen because that wasn't the direction that you guys chose to go. But that's okay, because one of the cool parts about D&D, a little bit of a peek behind the Dungeon Master screen, is that you can move those characters to different places. You can reintroduce those stories in different ways. So it's all about that being creative. And it's something that this kid, if he wants to continue being a Dungeon Master, will learn, because they're going to remember this, and they're going to remember the look on everyone's faces of being disappointed, and they will probably make a change.
That's true.
At least I hope so.
Would you like to hear a comment that's on there as well?
Absolutely, yes.
So this person said, I still remember my Dungeon Master's first and only Dungeon Master playable character. It was a half-orc barbarian, pretty big and bulky person. We were playing some starter module. He cleaved the Nothic in half in one blow.
Lost Mines of Phandelver.
I don't know those words, but
that's cool. That's the one that we're playing on Brunch and Brawl.
Cool.
Yeah, so the thing underneath the cave that like has the one eye and the spikes all over it, that's a Nothic.
Okay,
yes.
That's fair.
So it was probably that module, but continue.
I like that. We were all still new, and this was the first time the non-playable character had joined us, so it was kind of cool. The party walks down the hall, opens a door to some bugbears, and his character gets killed in one shot. Man, it was so funny. We had a special little ceremony of the character sheet. He never created a Dungeon Master playable character after that.
I love that so much. Okay, so honestly, that is the best way to handle as a Dungeon Master. Oh no, I messed up.
Yep.
I was being like, oh no, they critted. Oh no, it's dealt so much damage, they're instantly dead. Oh, darn it. And it's just like, and now it's dead and gone. And
the
it's
next
great.
comment is basically, that sounds like a Dungeon Master playable character done perfectly.
Yes,
to be honest.
I love that.
It's just like a fun kind of collaboration between there. And I do think it's fun, even if you do have a very powerful character. I think there was another campaign that we played before, or a one-shot, where there were these very powerful characters, but they were being like taken out super quickly. And instead of trying to show, okay, this character is really cool and they're doing all these great things, it was to show how dangerous the bad guys were. And it's like building out that story instead of just railroading us towards, oh, look at how cool this one character is and how they can do those types of things. I think that's important in Dungeons and Dragons, but also in any kind of creative avenue. When we're talking through the storylines that we want to do for the next podcast episode or something like that, we generally go, okay, well, maybe we can do this, or maybe we can add on top of that. Even the stories that we tell each other, we try to give each other something that we can kind of like feel for, and we know that the other person will probably have something that's really interesting to say, because you want to collaborate. It's not fun if I go over and say, hey Andrew, let me give you a story that has nothing to do with anything you've ever known before. It's going to be very complicated, make you very, very nervous.
Are you calling me out on the service animal?
No. That was an absolutely perfect story for that one. I was not expecting it, but I loved it. That was fantastic.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. But we do those kind of things because you knew that it would be a good story for us to discuss, and it's something that we really need to talk about.
Yeah,
in the same way, a lot of these stories are for us to kind of talk through more complicated and nuanced situations, but also for the people listening, if you're in a situation where you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, or you have like a weird relationship, maybe it's just enough to hear somebody else talk about it and you go, yeah, I agree with you. Maybe the Dungeon Master playable character that I have in the campaign right now can be a little bit overpowered, and I can kind of collaborate more with it. So
yeah, and that's so my encouragement to anyone listening who is playing Dungeons and Dragons with a Dungeon Master PC. Have a conversation with them, because just share with them. It's like, hey, I really appreciate the story that you're trying to tell, but I do feel like I, as a player, am not able to really engage with the content. I feel like it's more of a situation where you're telling the story and I'm kind of a side character. I have one friend who the one game that I play D&D with, he's a phenomenal DM. He's one of those people that like does voices so well that you're just like, how are you not a professional voice actor?
I love those too. This is so good.
But like, one of the funny jokes that we played the Wild Beyond the Witchlight campaign, which is this like where you almost like an Alice in Wonderland dive into fairy tale kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we had a running joke, because there was a lot of NPCs that he would have join with us, because they're just so much fun characters. Yeah. But he had a bad habit of accidentally having the NPCs killing the bad guy.
Oh no.
It became a joke, a running joke, because it was like, man, you got to get all those kills, don't you, DM? Which, like, we know that wasn't the case. It was this, I'm playing very strictly by, like, this is the remaining HP of the bad guy. The NPC that you guys wanted to come with you got the final hit and killed it.
That's fair.
It happens.
Yeah.
It just happened coincidentally so often that it just became a running joke at that point in time. And so now, if it, like, I'm playing another campaign with him right now, we're doing Rime of the Frost Maiden. Yeah. And so now anytime it gets close to happening, I'm like, are you gonna take that? Are you gonna kill Steel DM? Are you gonna take the kill from us?
I love that. I love that.
No, I love playing with him though. He's such a fun person to play with. But.
Thank you for joining us on this little geek dive.
Absolutely.
It was really fun for us. Hopefully it was fun for you as well. If not,
you got 3 more episodes before you have to hear us dive into something again. So,
So yeah, just be ready for that. We're going to go back to our, I won't say normally scheduled programming, because this might become more of the normally scheduled programming in the future as well. If people are really enjoying it, we enjoy talking about Dungeons and Dragons and other kinds of gaming and things like that, just because we are geeks and nerds.
Absolutely.
So like, hopefully you'll enjoy it too. But we also have socials, right?
Yep. So we are, if you're watching us on YouTube, obviously you can like and follow, or subscribe, not like and follow. You can subscribe, hit that little bell next to the little subscribe button, and you'll get notified every time we put a new episode on. Absolutely. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple or any of those other podcasting services, you can always hit that little plus button to follow us. Leave us a rating if you enjoy the show, and give us a comment. You can, I didn't know you could do this. You can comment on like Spotify and like Apple Podcast and those things. They can actually do comments.
Yeah. So
feel free to leave us a comment. Share your own stories of anything that's crazy that's happened in your campaign, or if you have questions for us that like relate to Dungeons and Dragons, feel free to like drop that as well.
Yeah, please. We'll try to read them if we can.
Yeah. I love engaging with content. So.
Yes, thank you for listening. We might have more of this. We might even have like a full Dungeons and Dragons session sometime, somewhere
maybe in the near
there.
future.
We'll see.
Maybe.
Potentially. Keep listening. Stay tuned. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.